This is going to be a bit of a different video. If you guys didn't know, as well as being into cars, I'm actually a carpentry apprentice. Just about to go into my 4th year of carpentry apprentice, so I'm on the tail end. And what I want to show you in this video is my work car. Now, it's not really so much about the car, but more what's inside. But we may as well start with the car. It's a 2009 Toyota Hiace. I'm sure you've seen a million of these on the road. This one is a petrol 5-speed manual. There's really only one reason why I chose this car. It's because it is indestructible. I've had it for almost 2 years now, and it has never ever let me down. It is a very, very reliable car. And now my van is due for a tidy up big times. And to make this video as honest as possible, I have done absolutely zero cleanup for this thing. I haven't even washed the car. I haven't done anything. So this is what it looks like now. So as you can see, it's chaos. So what I'm going to do in this video is clear out everything in here, walk you through what I think you need as an apprentice and what I use all the time, and maybe stuff that I don't use so often, and then we're going to put it back in here nice and tidy. So let's get cracking. This old bus has 2 main entry points. There is one here, obviously on the passenger side, and the other is the tailgate area here. Now, you might think that this van looks surprisingly empty, but I promise you, when everything is laid out on the ground, you're going to change your mind. There is a lot of stuff in this van. Yeah, I'm actually a little bit nervous to pull everything out. I don't know how long it's going to take, but I can imagine this isn't going to be a 5-minute video. Okay, so this is everything. I have pulled everything out of the van, with a few exceptions, which we're going to start with first. So if you love tools, then this is the video for you. Now, there is a lot of stuff here, and I'm actually going to go through all of it with you in detail, including what's in my mailbag and what's in these little handheld tools. It's just to show up and coming apprentices and possibly tradesmen as well, what they're likely to expect. Now, if you're just standing frames and that, you don't need this. This is property maintenance. The reason I've got so much stuff is when you do property maintenance, it's really quite difficult to know what you're going to need. So it's good to just have one of everything, and just saves trips back and forth to Bunnings and Mitre 10s and stuff. So let's get started. I do want to mention, almost all of these tools are mine personally. However, there are a few exceptions. I think some of the boxes of nails are not mine. They're provided by the boss. The ladders are not mine, except with the exception of the small one. And I think that's it. So the vast majority is mine, but there is some that aren't. Oh, a few things like some multi-tool blades and things are not mine, but as an apprentice they're provided to you. So yeah. So one thing that I'm actually not taking out is this. Now this is just all set up for lengths of timber, scrap lengths of timber, and it goes all the way to the cage in the van. So for example, just picking this is, all right, that's not very long, but it's great to have lengths of timber because you don't know when you're going to need it, doing framing or anything. And when I do property maintenance, it's pretty common that you don't really need a lot. You might just need a length or two or whatever. I've just got a little bit of flashing here, and this is probably the only thing in here that's also worth talking about, and this is just a roll of builder's paper. So it's just good to keep in there. Again, if you don't have one on site, then you just got to go to Bunnings and get some, and it's quite dear, so I just keep that roll with me at all times. The other thing down here is I've just got the head of a vacuum, and that's really it. Other than that, she's pretty empty. All of these timbers and everything, they're all offcuts from jobs. I don't buy timber for this. This is just all what's left over, and it's just good to drive around with it rather than it just going in the skip. So down there, I keep these. These are just a pair of gum boots for when we do concreting. Now, I do concreting very rarely, but it does happen every now and then. You don't want to miss out on those gum boots, and then you're up to your ankles in concrete and ruining your socks and that. So just good to throw them in the car, you never know. I'm going to start with these just because they're right next to me. Now these are a box of window packers. Now window packers are very, very useful when you're packing windows or door jambs. You stack them together like this, especially on old houses, just to make sure you straighten the jam, and just some screws that goes with them. And I've also got some aluminium hinge packing screws. So very, very useful, and I think this was full at the start of the week. So I really go through quite a lot of those. It's also really great to have one of these. The little power boards are okay, but if you're running on any commercial site or anything, you have to have one of these. Plus, it's just better to have one of these. If you've got a drop saw and everything, if it's got a little breaker on it, so make sure you grab one of those when you can. Now I do quite a lot of silicone work, as I'll show you later in the video. So in this tub is everything silicone. So that makes it sound very organized, but it's not. I've also got a couple of things of woodworking glue for miters, but this is just really mostly full of paddle pop sticks, silicone nozzles. There's just some gumption and some white caps in there. And in this little tub, I've just got some of those caulking screens. So yeah, I actually do use this tub quite often, and it's just good to have a little tub that you can pick up and move to somewhere else. So I also use this tub to mix grout if I'm doing a little bit of tile repairs or anything. So you'll notice that it's pretty dirty. So that's what I've, mixed grout in. All right, the next is a very, very important tool, my camp chair. There's nothing worse than going on smoko and you don't have a chair. It does happen every now and then, especially if you're on the job for a really long time. Sometimes I leave this on site. But I don't use it really too often. But all right, the next thing we've got is this. This is my drop saw. Now, you might be wondering, Deacon, everything else is Makita. Why do you have an AEG drop saw? Well, it just happened to be one of those things where it was just the right time. I needed a droppy, and it was in my first year, so I had a bit less money. But yeah, it's just worked out. I admit it's not the best drop saw on the planet, but it does do everything that a drop saw needs to do. So slides back and forth, goes all the way down, and does all the angled and beveled cuts. In the future, I probably would like to get a Makita one, especially those little 18-volt Makita cordless ones, and have this stay here in the shed. It's very, very noisy as well, and the blade on it is knackered, so somewhere here I've got another one. So I did take the handle off of here, and that's so that if I put this under here, it slides back. So that's how it goes. Next thing you're going to want is levels. Now, when this car was fitted out, I actually didn't fit it out. They have built this little area just for that. So this one is 600 deep, which you want a 600 level to get the heads on your door jambs bang on. This is a 1200 level, which you use all the time. Now, I actually don't have a 2-meter level, but I should get one for sure. But I do have an 1800 straight edge. Just slides in there like that. So when you have a straight edge and you have a small level, you can sort of make it work like you've got an 1800 level or a even bigger one. So definitely have a straight edge. Also got a 2-4 straight edge, blue oxide, and that just lives up there. Now, one of my least favorite things to do is painting. However, as a sort of maintenance bloke, you do it a lot. So in this little area, you'll notice there's some little drips and stuff. This is where I keep all of my painting gear. So I'll show you how I organize it. So I've got 2 of these Monarch paint trays. They're pretty good. I try and reuse them as much as I can before I throw them out, and I've got a little one there, and so those just slide in like that. And then I've got some rollers. Again, these aren't anything special, they're just cheap ones, but a 270 and a 230, they just sort of find their way in there. A little paint thing like this is really good for either washing brushes or walking around with a little brush and just doing touch-ups or whatever you want to do, but it's little, but it's really good. So that sort of hangs out there. In here is a really good wall roller. I try and keep one really good one and a bunch of kind of cheap ones. You never know what you're going to use. So that one just sort of lives in here somewhere, usually like that. I do keep a few of the little rough rollers, just if we're ever painting something that is more function than form, like bitumen paint or something like that on a stump, you don't want to use a good one. So that's pretty much what this roller's for. It's just a rough and dirty one, so that sort of just hangs out there. Okay, the next thing you're going to need is a screw box. Now, you don't need an expensive Milwaukee one like this, but you do need something. You do need some way of storing all of your screws and fixings and plaster mates and everything. So I'm just going to give you a quick rundown of what I sort of carry in here. So our top layer one, you lift that and it slides off. Now, what do we have in here? So in here I've got some masonite fixings, some tile drill bits, little brass plug. I'd say the most used thing in here is the plaster mates, and it's just cool that you can pull these out and take them with you on the job. Next one, so if I undo here, lift this up. So in here I've got a lot of hinge screws, a lot of chipboard screws, some little screws, some roofing screws with the washer, some metal, some steel framing screws. And in the center here, I've got my Recipro blades and some jigsaw blades as well. So that's what's going on there. Oh, and there's also some plaster screws over in that corner. And I really like this setup because you can go pick this up and take it to the job. You don't have to take the whole thing. So that's what's in there. This is our next one. In the center here, I've got the bits for my hammer drill. So they live in the center here. And this is mostly nails and clouts. You can see quite a lot of nails, clouts, and there is a tub here of 100mm batten screws. But yeah, mostly nails, clouts, and just some overlap. Milwaukee pack-out system is expensive, but I do like that you can just sort of clip everything together. And it's just, and you have to have this. You don't want to just have all of this loose. My big screw box lives just there. Now you guys might think, Deacon, why do you have a little hose reel in your car? And this is just a little retractable one. Sometimes you go to a client's house and if you're mixing up concrete or just for stumps or whatever, sometimes they don't have a hose or sometimes they don't want you using them. So I do keep this in the van, and I just bought this little one because it rolls up and it just fits nicely in there. Quite a bit going on in here. Now down the side here, I keep all of my long things. I do have a square mouth concreter shovel, so that lives down the side here. I do have a little hard bristle decking brush, so that goes down the side as well. All right, the next thing that you're gonna need, a soft bristle broom. Now you don't need this huge one, but you definitely need a broom because you're gonna be making a lot of mess and you wanna make sure when you leave somebody's house, you don't leave crap everywhere. So brooms, this one actually I probably get used almost every day. Now I do a lot of demos, so I do keep my demo tools here normally. Everyone calls these different things, but I call them a mash hammer, and that just like that. I have a little pry bar here. These are just basic craft right ones. They're not expensive, but you gotta have them. I've also got this little crowbar, again, just something that you need to have. If you don't have it, it can just make it very, very difficult. And this one is probably the most important. Having a rubber mallet is fantastic if you're ever given something a whack and it's quite delicate, or yeah, just very, very important. I've had this one for years. You can see it's had quite a beating. So okay, we're switching over to this door. I want a bit more space to walk around out there. So in this drawer, I keep all of my Makita power tools. So I've pretty much got almost one of everything I would think of the Makita family. So you might be thinking, Deacon, what Makita tools do I need? You know, I'm a first year. Well, I hate to break it to you, but if you're doing maintenance, pretty much need them all. No, you don't need them all on day one, but you will need them all in the long run. Now, before I go into this, Milwaukee, Makita, DeWalt, choose one. Just choose one, Hikoki, whatever you like. Just choose one family and sort of stick with them. It just makes it much easier to swap out batteries and charger. I initially went for pretty much the same that all the other chippies on site were using, and that way if we need to, we can swap batteries, we can borrow chargers, that kind of thing. I chose Makita. I really like Makita, and 3 years on, nothing has failed me. So let's have a look. The first things you're going to need are these, your drill and your impact driver. These are probably the most used tools that I would have. I've gone for the brushless ones. You need a drill to make the hole, and you definitely need one of these to drive the hole, especially batten screws into LVLs and stuff. You're going to be really putting a lot of torque on your wrist if you're using this. So a Recipro, you absolutely need a Recipro. Now I've taken it out, but they've normally got a big blade in the end, and you use them for cutting studs. I would use these mostly for removing windows. So once I pulled off the architraves, I can run this down and cut the nails and pull the window out, or door as well. So I use this all the time. If you're standing pre-built frames, you're definitely going to need one of those to cut out the bottom plate where a door is. Now this is my battery circular saw. It has gotten a lot of use. It's just a pretty basic one, but you really do need one. I would say that this is something that you probably need day one. It can be scary at first when you've never used one, but I'm so used to it now. 99% of the time, it just has a timber blade inside. You definitely need a grinder, not just for cutting nails or cutting flashings or just cutting stuff. Sometimes you got to cut cement sheet, and I know you're not supposed to, but you do put a diamond blade in here and cut it. Or you're cutting tiles, you just need a grinder. So that's another essential tool. This one has had a lot of use again and still works great. Now, the old multi-tool. Now, it wasn't too long ago that these were a bit of a joke of a tool. However, they've come a long way. I use this for doing checkouts sometimes, for cutting plaster. This is a really, I mean, if you're doing renovations, you absolutely need to have one. Every now and then I pull out a brick, replace it and repoint it. I use a diamond blade on the multi-tool to cut out the mortar, and that works really, really well. The sander. If you're a framer, you don't need this, but if you're doing any sort of fix or any sort of maintenance, you definitely do. It's perfect for sanding miters, you know, removing the aerosol stuff, and I mean, it's self-explanatory. It's got so many uses. So definitely need a sander, and this little one is great. It's very small. Now, this is probably the one that I would say you'd need the least as an apprentice. As you can see, it's probably my newest looking tool because it's got the least amount of use. This is a router. I use this for checkouts, hanging doors. It's got a million uses, honestly, but just using it to check out hinges is probably by far and away the most common use. The old hammer drill. Now, you definitely need a hammer drill. Now, if you're a framer, you'll definitely need one of these as well. These are used for drilling into concrete or masonry. So you can fix your bottom plate into your slab. You can fix doors and windows into brick, and there's heaps of renovation things you can do with it. So you can attach one of those little spade bits on the end and use it to rip up tiles, which is what I was actually doing yesterday. Or you can use it to knock down bricks. It's like a little jackhammer, so definitely need one of those. This is the planer. This is used for straightening walls, straightening floors. Allows you to just run it along and take a couple of mil off, or plane a high spot or a low spot. You'll need it for hanging doors. I mean, it's just got a lot of use. So this one is very well used. So yeah, good old planers, you definitely need one. This is probably something that you don't need. This actually doesn't come out of my car too often, but if you're doing renovations, I would say that you do need one. If you're putting in sinks or anything like that, you do need one. Or sometimes if you're doing checkouts for stairs and stuff, it's just really good to have one of these. And actually, I did use it to cut bird's mouths in some rafters just yesterday. All right, we're almost at the end. This is a blower. Now, I think these are really, really handy. These are often thrown as like little free promotional things, but they're really good. They're really, really good because you can just blow heaps of stuff. If you're working on someone's driveway, you can blow off the driveway, or you know, you can just clean up really quickly. So I really think that if you can get one, definitely get it. And a torch. Now, this isn't essential, but they're quite inexpensive. I use these when I'm crawling under the house. I don't want to be using my phone because there's just crap everywhere and I don't want to be laying my phone on the ground. So I use this little guy, and you can attach it like that, or you can hang it off somewhere. It's just a really good thing. And I also use it camping. It's really good camping. It lasts ages. So this was the biggest corded saw that I could buy at Sydney Tools, I think it was, when I got it. And you definitely need this. If you're cutting timber up the guts, that's what you need to use. The battery one, a lot of the time, is not going to cut it. If it's trim and architraves, okay, the battery one's probably okay, but if it's framing or LVLs or something like that, you definitely need the rip saw. The Makita tools continue. So this is my speaker. I think that this is one of the most important tools on the job site, whether you got a little Bluetooth one like this or one of the radio style ones. The reason I've got this one is because it was $100 on Marketplace and it was brand new. Somebody didn't want it in the kit they got. So that's the one I have. And the other one, now this is definitely not needed if you're a framer, but I have one of these little Makita vacuums. Now, is this the best vacuum on the planet? No. But it is perfect for just when you make a very small amount of mess. Let's just say you're in a customer's house and you've just sanded something and there's just a little bit of mess on the floor. That's what this is awesome for. It saves me getting out the vacuum and plugging it up. And it doesn't sound like much, but when you're doing it every day, just having a little battery one that you can grab in 2 seconds is really worth the price tag. This little attachment that clips onto the body, and it's got this little guy as well. And this guy just lives right there. Now, another thing you've got to have is batteries. There is nothing worse than not having enough batteries and always worrying about charging them and always having to swap tools over and stuff. It's just no good. So make sure you grab lots of batteries. So up on this little shelf, I keep this. Now, this is my Pazload framing gun. Now, pretty much whatever level of carpentry you are in, you need a framing gun, especially obviously if you're a framer. I really like the Pazloads. They're nice and light. I don't pay for the gas or nails, so the gas doesn't bother me, but yeah, these are the best. So in my Pazload bag, other than the gun, I've just got the charger and a couple more batteries that are ready to go and a couple of racks of nails. But yeah, it mostly lives in there. The gun just sits in there and that little stud just stops it from falling over. This is just a duffel bag full of silicone. Now, I don't think that everybody needs this much silicone. It's just a combination of liquid nail, silicone, some Sika sausages and all this other stuff. I would definitely say you do need a caulking gun, even if it's just a cheap one like this, 20 bucks. And you definitely would need a Sika gun if you're putting down flooring. So next up we have this little tub. Now 99% of tradies wouldn't need this because I do a lot of doors and windows. I do a lot of fly screens, so a lot of these are like fly screen clips, some keys, those little wing nut things. Like, yeah, the vast majority of tradies, you wouldn't need that, especially if you're a framer, wouldn't bother with that. Need one of these. Now I actually have another one that's being used in the shed at the moment that's normally in here. This is my smaller one and I would typically only run this inside for like a vacuum or something. I wouldn't really run this outside, but that just lives just there. Got some more tubs here now. In this one is a heat gun. It's just a basic Azito one. I use a heat gun very rarely, so it doesn't need to be the best one in the world. It's just a corded one. The odd time when we need some bog or something to dry a little bit faster, or some filler. I don't know what the real name for this one is, but we call it a sucker. We use this to suck onto glass if we're deglazing something, and that allows us to suck onto the glass like that and hold it with a handle. It's just much safer than holding it with your hands. So those are really cool. And this is the big boy, the Pazload fixing gun. Now, I like Pazload here because I can share my framer and fix her batteries. And yeah, they're just a really good gun. Our fixer goes there, and these go just there. You might think this is lame, but it's a knee pad. Trust me, guys, you want to be using a knee pad. Also got a bag of rags that just stays up there as well. And I've got this attachment for my drill. If I'm ever mixing something like paint or concrete, it's good to hold on to the drill like this so it doesn't break your wrist. It's just sitting up there because I'm not really sure where else to put it. So right at the top there, I just keep this big dustpan and just a couple drop sheets, and I sort of just wedge them on the roof there. Drop sheets are really important if you're working on a customer's house, especially if you're painting. You definitely need drop sheets. Area is all little bits and bobs, really. So that's why it's sort of in the middle shelf here that I can't really access all the time. So the very first thing, which I believe goes here, is just some bin bags. It's just a roll of heavy duty bin bags. You never know if you're going to need it, if you're unlucky enough to find asbestos on site, or if you just need a bin bag. They're really good. So I do have some trowels like bricklaying and rendering or whatever. It's pretty rare that I use these. They don't really get much use at all, if I'm honest, but it's always good to have them, and they're very inexpensive. And every now and then, like I've got a job next week where I do have to point a couple of bricks, and it's just good to have it. In the same vein, I have a little rubber trowel for grout. And again, I don't do it very often. It's just good to have one up there. So in this shelf, I keep a lot of my bog. So this is builder's bog. I've got another one there. I'm sure you know, builder's bog is really important if you're doing a lot of property maintenance. You've got to have some in the car. I've got some exterior spack. I've got some interior filler. So this is good for nail holes and arcs and everything if I need to fill that. I do have a container of top coat. So this is for doing plaster patches. Now, if you don't know me, I actually do a lot of plaster patches on the side after work, and I don't know where I'd be without it. It can be difficult to learn, but once you got it down, it's pretty good financially. So always keep one of those in the car. And I've got some glue as well. This is just a big container. It was for screws, but it's not as interesting as it looks. It's just full of sanding discs, and it's just full of grinding discs. That's pretty much it. So lots of sanding pads, just all different grits of sandpaper for my sander, and some diamond blades. That's all that's in here. So I just keep it in this nice little one spot. So similar To this tub, I've just got another tub full of random stuff. This is mostly tape. So ram board, joining tape, some double-sided tape, duct tape, some plumber's tape, some Velcro tape. Also have one of these in here. This is what you need for installing fly screen mesh. Push the spline in with this little point and then roll it along. So I've got one of those. And I've also got some polishing wheels and some of this colored clay, I think it is. So it's just good to have that kind of stuff. Little bits and bobs, you're probably never going to need it, but you never know. So this is a little container full of a lot of accessories for the Makita stuff. So I've got a handle for my grinder, a little catcher for the sander, and the rest is mostly accessories for the router. So again, don't use them very often, but you got to have them with you. I do carry some paint as well. This is like gal spray. This is more function than form. I use this mostly with retaining walls if I'm ever cutting steel for retaining wall, but it's good to have some in the car. I've got some line marking paint for setting out. I've also got one of these. This is called a wedgie. What you do is you deflate them totally and you can slide them under a door and you press your foot on this and it squeezes it up and it helps you hang the door. It's really useful if you're alone and you've got a big heavy door. It's just really good to have another helping hand so you can line the hinges up. Okay, nobody needs this. I do actually keep an iron in the car. I bought it because I was at a kitchen job and some of the strip had come away from the melamine, and so I was able to run this over it and heat the glue back up and stick it back down. And I've actually just had to do something similar but with a carpet join. And of course I was the only one with one of these in the van. But again, it doesn't take up too much space. It can live up here with my trowels. I've just got another little tub of plastic glue. Okay, so this shelf is mostly about consumables. So if you guys saw before, I have a Pazload fixer. So I have a lot of Pazload nails. So I've got 3 boxes of brads here. I've got 63s, 45s and 38s. And the rest is framing nails. So this is a box of 75mm gal framing nails and another big box of the same thing. I don't use these very often, but these are a box of 90mm nails. So they're worth keeping and my gun can shoot them, but we don't normally use them. I've got one of these Rocket flat sanders and all the sandpaper to go with it. These are great for plaster repairs and that's what I would use it for 90% of the time. In the last section, I forgot this plaster tape just goes up there, along with this one. On the top shelf, I also keep this is just a box of random size silver rivets. I've got 2 more containers. This one is also rivets, but these are all colored ones to suit flashings. For example, there's some classic cream ones. There's a lot of monument gray and black, pretty much everything other than silver. And in this little container is just a bunch of staples and blades, mostly staples. Perfect. I also have a dual battery Makita charger. Obviously, you need this to charge your batteries. I've got a dual one and a single one, but the dual one is just up there. Just on our last shelf, I just keep some of this painting stuff that I can't keep down there just because I've got no room. So in here is some little sanding sponges, a brush, just a small thing of bog and 2 rollers, and that just sort of sits like that. I've also got one of these Milwaukee door handle installers. These are fantastic and they're great for your average door. So what you pretty much do, we'll pretend this is your door, but you just slide this over, tighten the clamp, and once it's all aligned, you can drill through there, and that's your standard door handle. So yeah, just a really handy thing. So up on this shelf, I keep my rollers, the not very good ones, a box of the smaller ones as well. So they just live up there. And I've got my little Makita single battery charger. We actually do use this every now and then. I normally just keep it there somewhere. I've also got a big DeWalt metal rafter square and I just keep that slid just in there like that just because it takes up no space. I just keep some cheap brushes. I'd never use these for a customer's house, but for oiling a deck or using it for something rough, they're fine. And I've got a bunch of pencils. I just keep those in there as well. Now I did actually forget a few things. I have a little rolling stick for painting. This one's terrible. This is really a spare and it's actually bowed from me using it. So that's a spare, but I do have a much nicer aluminium one. And you can extend this, it's just way better. So that also lives in there. I forgot this as well, I have a big crowbar, so that also slides down in the bottom there. The next thing is this. I've got a rivet gun, some vice grips, plaster saw, a bevel, some tin snips, just some assorted screwdrivers, more tin snips, a knife for cutting cement sheet. I don't know what you guys call this, but we call it a whacker. And I've also got some pliers, a square, and a flathead screwdriver. And a little texter. On the other side, a little socket set, which is way overdue for replacing. Just some normal drill bit cases. Little thing here of screw heads and Phillips head and some batten screws. Also got a staple gun. This little thing, which is full of spanners. They're not the best in the world, but you don't really need great spanners for doing carpentry. Scotty's come to hang out with us. I hope everybody doesn't mind. Thank you, bud. A little torpedo level, a coping saw, some staples for the stapler, and a string line. Forget, in here there's some gloves. I do have a chalk line in there, a permanent one, some Allen keys there. And this pack out box just lives right there on top of all the others. I've also got some clamps, so these have a dual purpose. One, it's good to store them like this, but they also act as a fence, so this doesn't fall out. I've also got one of these clamps, two of the smaller ones which go just near the framing gun. I've also got this toolbox. Now this actually used to be full of spanners and sockets, which I've taken them out and put in the shed, but the toolbox is pretty good, so I'll show you what's in it. It's just kind of throw everything in it kind of box. So up here I've got all of my sharp chisels. I've got an old chalk line, some more chalk, and a hacksaw. There's even more chalk, hacksaw blades, files, and a much bigger box of screwdrivers. That's really all that's in here that's worth talking about. Probably wouldn't go buy this toolbox, but I already had it. And this toolbox can sit right there. It's also a good idea to carry a spare blade. Forgot to mention before, that's a spare blade for my drop saw. Next time I use the saw, I'll swap that over. So just in this little area, these are just some cheap masonry bits that go into a standard drill. I don't really use these that often, and that's why I've got a cheap set. Right there, I do use these often. These are SDS bits, so these are same masonry, but these are for the hammer drill. So you can see they're a lot more used. So they also live there. There's also some router bits, which are the good old Aldi Work Zone ones, but I tell you what, they work fantastic. And I've also got this. This is a Craft Right hole saw set. These are pretty average, if I'm honest. No, actually, they're really poor. They're really only good for plaster. That's really about it. They get tucked behind there. Now, the next thing is every tradie's favorite, cleaning. Now, all of my nice cleaning stuff I keep in this bucket. Got some glass cleaner, a sponge, some rags, a little scrubbing brush, some rubber gloves, some sugar soap concentrate, another little brush, a magic eraser. These are really good for wiping things off walls. And I've got a bottle of this paint cleanup stuff and some turfs and another eraser. So that all lives in this bucket all the time. Not to mention the bucket itself is very clean. As opposed to these buckets, which are disgusting inside. These are rubbish buckets. So there's two of them there. I really like these Bunnings buckets. They're real strong. They last ages. The handles don't break and they're really cheap. So 2 rubbish buckets and 1 clean one. I take PPE very seriously. Here I've got my sun hat. I actually wear this a lot. It's really important to protect your skin from the sun, especially in Australia. So we've got that, but I do have a lot more PPE that I hang up here. I do carry a respirator. You never know when you're going to need them, and it's important to have a good one. I've also got a couple pairs of goggles. I do have some glasses as well that are in the front seat, but the goggles are fantastic for me anyway. My eyes are quite sensitive, and yes, you look silly wearing them, but I tell you what, they work really well, and it means that you can rip stuff without getting anything in your eyes. So I really, really like. Next one is my little step ladder. It's only a little 2-stepper. It's nothing crazy. I don't really use it that often, but it just folds up and hangs off that. This last little hook, I just hang a cheap little dustpan and brush. I've also got a proper vacuum in here. So this is just a much better one. This is something that I'd use on a final cleanup of somebody's actual house, like the last day. In this little corner is a very fancy tradesman spec Aldi bag full of straps. So roof racks are really important for a work car, and I just keep that there so if the van's loaded I can still tie things on the roof. So I also keep a couple of spare blades. There's 2 there. These are for the powered rip saw, and then I've got a cement sheet one for my battery saw. I do include a spare set of bad sneakers. You never know when you're going to use them, but everything else here is just sort of quick access. There's just some random screws, some used multi-tool blades and some SDS bits, some planer blades. They sort of just hang out at this little step. Some hinges and some more fly screen clips, and just a little bit of door hardware. I kind of just have them sitting there, and I try and leave a space so I can get my big hoof in there and climb into the car. I also carry some spade bits. There's a nail just around the corner and they just hang up there like that. I also do carry some expander foam. Like I said before, I take PPE pretty seriously. I've got these anti-cut gloves, but I've also got these things, they're almost like chainmail. This is for when we're carrying windows or demoing glass, and you put this on your arm and it slides right up your arm, and then you put your glove over it. It just protects your wrist mostly, so yeah, very important to have those. Speaking of that, my earmuffs, they just live right there. So just about the last thing on the shelf is this bag full of fly screen clips, and I've got a pretty big bag of zip ties. I do also have a box of masks, so that stays in here. 2 guides for my rip saw, which you absolutely need, and the little things off my drop saw. Also have a combination of plastic and steel scrapers. You right there, bud? This is Scotty. This is the first time he's been allowed in the van, and he's just having a bit of an explore. So I have them there so that they're easy to grab at any time. Next thing I've got is a builder's square. Pretty self-explanatory. And I've also got this door holder. What you do is put this on the ground. We'll pretend this is a door, and you lay it down, and it squeezes the door like that, and the weight of the door keeps it down, and this allows you to work on hinges or whatever. The next thing I've got is a little step ladder. I really like these ones because they're really small and they're really light. And this is the other one, so it's probably about twice the weight, but it does fold out, so this is really good for getting on someone's roof and stuff like that. I store the ladders on their vertical like this. So this one first. And this one. This bungee cord that wraps around and hooks onto them just so they don't fall over. Now the next thing I've got is a pair of sawhorses. Now I chose these because they fold up really small. I think they can have like 600 kilos or something on them, but the main thing is they fold up really small, and that's really all there is to it. So these just live in here like this. Now you may have noticed that I don't have a drop saw bench. That is actually one thing that I'm yet to get. But in the meantime, I use my sawhorses. So I've got a couple of LVL offcuts. These always live in the car, and these are my saw bench or my workbench, whatever you want to call it. So they're tough as old nails. You can walk on them. They're really strong. So that's my saw bench. All right, this is the nail bag. Now this is something that you definitely need. Actually, this is probably the first purchase you would need to make as an apprentice. This is actually the nail bag that I bought on day one. It's a king chrome one. It's cheap and nasty from Bunnings, but it does the job. These shoulder straps are also just the cheap, pretty average ones from Bunnings, but even though they're the cheap ones, they are so good. They make such a difference on your lower back. I definitely would be getting these, and look, I'm probably due for an upgrade soon. What should you have in a nail bag? I have a pretty good chisel. It's not quite as nice as my woodworking ones, but it's not a demo one either, so that goes in there. On this side, I've got some pencils. I've got a knife. I've got a blue chalk line. I've also got some demo chisels, so they're just rough chisels pretty much. I've got a little cat's claw. You definitely need one of these. These little concrete ties are so important for pulling nails and stuff like that. So, on this side, I've got a 4-fold ruler. Every chippy needs one of those, and I've got my square. I've also got some punches and one of these quick pencils. I have a framing punch and some smaller ones as well. Right at the back is my Fat Max tape measure, which I absolutely love the Fat Max. I bought a cheap one because I was a first year This is probably the thing that I have that needs an upgrade the most. But if you're starting out, it's fine, honestly. And these shoulder straps are pretty average, but again, they do the job. This bag's 3 years old now, and there are reviews that Ty's holding this all together, but it still works. I've also just realised I didn't talk about hammer. Now this, how could you forget this? Now, when I first started, I bought just a cheap $20 Trojan hammer, and I remember walking past these at Total Tools, and these are like 150 bucks. And thinking, why would anyone ever spend that on a hammer? Well, I promise you, as soon as you start using one often, it totally changes your mind. Now, I went to the shop and I picked my favorite. This is an S-Wing, E-Swing, whatever you say. She is a few years old now. I think it's a 16 or an 18. It sort of leans towards the heavier ones, which I really like. I like the heavy ones. So get a good hammer and get a good nail bag. And my nail bag hangs like that. The only other thing that I remembered, which I didn't include, is a stud finder. So I've got a Bosch one here. This one's really good, hasn't failed me yet. Well, that's pretty much it, guys. It's sort of turned into a tour of the van, but also hopefully it shows you what you would need as an apprentice chippy. I'm almost going fourth year. I do like doing it now. I do like the skills that it gives me. Will I do it as a career? I'm not 100% sure. In terms of what I want to do to the van itself, nothing really, just maintenance. It has the most important thing that any work car is meant to have, which is it's got Bluetooth, and it's got a shockingly good radio and stereo system. It's got a perfect air conditioner, a heater. It's got everything that you would need. It's not fancy, but it starts every time I turn the key and everything works in it. So I really like this van, and I'll probably be keeping it at least till I'm qualified. I don't normally do carpentry content. I normally focus on cars, but I thought I'll try something different in this video and show you what I actually do for a living. As much as I'd love to tell you that I'm a super successful content creator and making hundreds of thousands of dollars a week, that's not the reality. I am a chippy. Hopefully you guys enjoyed, and please feel free to subscribe and follow along for what I do here. Thank you for watching.